Have you ever felt strangely lonely, even while standing among people who know you well, people who care about you, rely on you, and even love you? Not the loud kind of loneliness that comes from being abandoned, but the quiet kind that settles in when you are always present for others, yet rarely asked how you are doing yourself. This story begins in that quiet space. Kaori is the kind of woman many admire from a distance. Talented, responsible, calm under pressure. At work, she is known for her discipline and fairness. She follows rules not because she enjoys authority, but because structure is the way she keeps the world predictable and safe. Even when her subordinate is also a longtime friend, she draws clear boundaries. No special treatment, no exceptions. To Kaori, professionalism is a form of respect. Yet fairness, when misunderstood, can look like coldness. Her colleagues see her standards before they see her intentions. Support slowly thins. Conversations quiet when she enters the room. And Kaori, perceptive as she is, notices every shift, though she rarely reacts.
しんどいな。納期間に合わないかも。
マジ？
ああ。
やばいっちゃ。
ちょっとな。しかし、女が上司ってやりづらいな。もっと他に敵がいるだろう。
女性枠で昇進しただけだよ。ほら、女を管理職にすると、国から補助金が出るらしいよ。
そういうことか。いい迷惑だよな。
たくだよ。
Her emotional refuge exists outside the office, in the familiar warmth of Kenji and his wife. They have known each other long enough that no explanations are required. With them, Kaori's shoulders soften. Her voice changes. She doesn't need to perform competence or restraint. She is simply allowed to exist. When Tina becomes pregnant with her first child, that sense of shared life deepens. The coming baby feels like a continuation of something they all built together, years of shared meals, shared worries, shared laughter. As the due date approaches, excitement mixes with anxiety. Kenji, usually steady, begins to show signs of quiet fear. He worries about responsibility, about change, about whether he will be enough. Kaori notices before anyone says anything. She always does. She steps in naturally, not to take control, but to steady the emotional ground beneath him. Her presence is calm, attentive, and reassuring. She listens without correcting. She speaks without overwhelming. She gently guides Kenji's thoughts away from fear and toward possibility, toward the life that is about to expand, not collapse. From the outside, it looks simple. 3 adults supporting one another through a meaningful transition. Nothing traumatic, nothing inappropriate, just people being there. But beneath that surface, something more fragile is forming. Because while Kaori continues to offer stability, few pause to ask what it costs her to always be the steady one. And sometimes the most important stories are not about what people do, but about what they quietly carry, unseen while doing it. As Tina's due date draws closer, the rhythm of Kaori's life begins to reveal a subtle imbalance. From the outside, nothing appears broken. She still arrives early to work. Her decisions remain fair, her tone measured. But psychological strain rarely announces itself through collapse. At work, the distance between Kaori and her colleagues grows thinner but sharper. Whispers begin not loud enough to confront, but persistent enough to be felt. Kaori hears them in the pauses of conversations, in meetings where agreement comes slowly, in the way eye contact drifts elsewhere. She understands the dynamic intellectually. Emotionally, it still weighs on her. What makes this heavier is that Kaori has learned over time to be the reliable one, the one who absorbs tension so others don't have to. This role often forms early in capable, sensitive people. They are praised for being strong, so they become practiced at hiding fatigue. They are valued for being steady, so they stop revealing uncertainty. Eventually, asking for support feels unnecessary or worse, inappropriate. With Kenji and Tina, Kaori still finds warmth, but even there, a quiet shift occurs. The focus is naturally on the coming child. Conversations revolve around preparation, future plans, and shared excitement. Kaori participates fully, sincerely happy for them. Yet there are moments small, almost invisible, when she senses herself becoming part of the background. Not excluded, just no longer centered in the way she once was. Kenji, meanwhile, is undergoing his own internal struggle. Anxiety has softened him, made him more observant. He begins to notice Kaori's exhaustion in the way she exhales when she thinks no one is watching. He notices how she deflects questions about herself, how encouragement always flows outward, never inward. He senses a loneliness that doesn't ask for attention, but quietly hopes for recognition. This is where human relationships become complex not through wrongdoing, but through imbalance. Kaori does not ask for help because she believes others need it more. Kenji hesitates because he assumes she is fine. Tina, immersed in physical and emotional transformation, trusts that Kaori, as always, will speak if something is wrong. Psychologically, this is how emotional isolation forms inside healthy relationships. Not through neglect, but through mutual assumptions. Everyone cares, everyone means well. Yet support flows in one direction for too long. And beneath the kindness and shared history, a silent question begins to form, one that many people carry but rarely voice. What happens when the person who is always there starts to feel unseen? The turning point does not arrive through confrontation. There are no raised voices, no emotional outbursts, no moment dramatic enough to demand attention. Instead, it comes in the way realizations often do in real life, quietly, after a long accumulation of small observations. One day, while they were having lunch together, Kenji noticed that Kaori seemed tired. She appeared calm, but that stillness weighed more heavily on him than usual. In that moment, Kenji understood something he had always avoided. Kaori was always present with everyone, but no one had truly been present with her. This realization carries a certain discomfort. It asks him to look at his own assumptions. He had believed strength meant not needing reassurance. He had believed that if someone doesn't ask for help, they don't need it. But psychology teaches us that people who give the most often feel the least permitted to receive. Their silence is not proof of ease, it is often a sign of adaptation. Kenji doesn't respond with grand gestures. Instead, he chooses something quieter and more sustainable. He starts by acknowledging what has gone unspoken. He thanks Kaori not casually, but deliberately for the emotional steadiness she has offered during his anxious moments. He recognizes her effort without framing it as duty or expectation. This alone shifts something. To be seen without being asked to explain or justify, is a powerful form of relief. Kaori begins to recognize her own pattern. She sees how easily she steps into the role of supporter and how rarely she allows herself to occupy the space of being supported. This awareness is not self-blame, it is self-clarity. She understands that boundaries are not walls. They are signals that guide others in how to care for us. The emotional climax of this story is not a separation or a dramatic choice. It is a mutual adjustment. Kanji learns that presence is not passive. It requires attention and reciprocity. Kaori learns that strength does not diminish when it is shared. And Tina, sensing the shift, naturally becomes part of this rebalancing, not as someone at fault, but as someone willing to hold space when it is finally offered. What emerges is not perfection, but alignment, a quiet recentering of the relationship, where care moves in more than one direction. And in that stillness, something deeply human becomes clear. Being together is not about proximity, it is about awareness. When the story settles, it doesn't offer a dramatic resolution. There is no clear victory, no final scene that promises life will now be effortless. Instead, it leaves us with something far more useful: understanding. The quiet truth this story reveals is that presence, while powerful, is not neutral. Being there for others can either build connection or slowly erase the self, depending on whether it is shared. Many people grow into adulthood believing that love means endurance, that kindness means never needing anything in return. Over time, this belief can turn supportive relationships into one-sided emotional labor, unnoticed not because others don't care, but because silence teaches them that everything is fine. From a psychological perspective, this is where emotional exhaustion often begins. Not with conflict, but with overfunctioning. The person who is capable becomes the person who is relied upon. The person who listens becomes the one who is rarely asked. And without intention, relationships drift out of balance. What Kaori's story invites us to reflect on is not who is right or wrong, but how awareness changes outcomes. Kenji didn't become more caring by doing more. He became more caring by noticing more, by learning that presence means tuning into what is unspoken, not just responding to what is expressed. In real life, this can look like checking in with the friend who is always fine, or offering support before it is requested. At the same time, Kaori's growth reminds us that self-respect and kindness are not opposites. Allowing ourselves to be seen does not burden others. It gives them the chance to show up. Boundaries are not rejections. They are invitations for healthier connection. When we name our limits gently, we make relationships safer, not weaker. In marriages, friendships, and workplaces, this lesson matters deeply. Stability does not mean emotional invisibility. Strength does not require constant self-sacrifice. The healthiest bonds are not formed by how much one person gives, but by how well people respond to each other over time. When presence becomes mutual, when care flows both ways, it creates a sense of safety that allows everyone involved to grow. And maybe that is why it truly is good when people are together, not because they never struggle, but because they learn how to see one another quietly and honestly before distance ever has a chance to form.